What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore, and we do that by highlighting the practitioners that make this the best field in athletics. And today we have a friend of mine. We work on the NSCA Special Interest Group for football. We were also, I guess, colleagues but competitors in the CAA. John Lynch, you're now at St. Lawrence. Thank you for being here, brother. There's a lot of other things you could be doing, so I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So everybody, just to fill you in, the reason that John and I, the big reason of this conversation is a blog that came out that I put out about our title being strength and conditioning coach and a bunch of things back and forth. Let's start. You have an interesting story. You're at St. Lawrence, you're at Maine. Talk about why, because you and I shared it privately, but your reasons for why you're at St. Lawrence now, your time at Maine, just kind of evolution of that.
Yeah, so Maine was my first full-time gig. I was there for 8 years total. Before that, I was at Northeastern with men's ice hockey. But, I was a football guy growing up and played football in, obviously high school and college. And so I knew that's where I wanted to be. I had I had one shot to go into Division I hockey, leaving Northeastern, turned it down to come to Maine, actually to assist with football, with my main responsibility being men's basketball that year. But I started there in 2015, assisted with football. The following year was the coach, staff turned over. I had made a relationship with the players. They, wanted me to be their strength coach. So that kind of transpired pretty quickly, as it usually does. And then it was only a couple months later when the head guy at the time, Matt Murray, who's now with the Florida Panthers in the NHL, he was the director, and he actually stepped down, and that opened the door for me to jump in there. So, my first year at Maine, going from never having a full-time job to being an assistant for 1 year, and then the head guy in the following year was, kind of a whirlwind, but it was fun and exciting. And I felt like I had put a lot of, energy in previously to kind of earn that. Not that I had all the experience, but you know how it is as an intern, as a GA, just working for nothing, and then it kind of all transpires kind of, at least for me, all at once. But I did that for 8 years total, but I think I learned for about 5 of those years. And I worked with a really great head coach, Joe Harris-Simiak, who's at Rutgers now, and some other really good coaches. But it took a long time to build that culture, and we did that. I brought some interesting things to the table. I got a pretty big Northeastern kind of opened my eyes. As a football guy, it's always the meat grinder. All is stress and more weight, and it was. And when I was at Northeastern, hockey really gave me a different experience, and I think they think about things a little bit differently. Soccer maybe is another sport that thinks about things quite a bit differently, and we've talked a lot about the high performance model, kind of on the football SIG, and it's obviously in the field today, it's pretty prevalent, at least in a lot of places. And that's what I experienced at Northeastern. We talked about breathing techniques. We talked about stress, pretty heavy influence from the Postural Restoration Institute. Not that it's, you can get pretty backed up on getting too deep in the rabbit hole with that stuff. But if you understand the concepts, I think you can really make some significant improvements. And that was kind of the two ends of the continuum for me from a philosophical standpoint, understanding like the work always mattered, but also how can you patch guys up when you need it? And it was totally new to our players at Maine. And I just remember in my first year as an assistant, like the players were coming to me and be like, "Coach, I've never felt better this deep into the season." And I wasn't even writing the program. I was just assisting with guys, teaching, like a little bit more specific exercise techniques, certain things to think about, just more just like stabilization in various primary lifts. And then, that took me a long way to keeping guys healthy. And it kind of bled into the programming that I was using, as we developed guys, through the spring and summer and into the fall. And then, just the culture, right? That's a school where you always have people who want to work, but they're not always as disciplined as they need to be. And maybe that's a lot of schools, but It certainly is at St. Lawrence now that I'm here. But anyway, we just strung together a few good years and got in some good recruits and guys who were interested in being a part of something special. And we had two really, really good team captains in Drew Belcher and Jeff Devon, who both went on to great careers. Drew's a coach now, I believe, at UNH, unless he's moved on to a bigger job. And Jeff Devon's a development guy at BC. They're both doing great things. But, they took the lead and were able to have a couple of really good years and won the CAA with a team that was, supposed to be bottom of the barrel. And I think it was from, just getting the guys together to make a decision to be great and then keeping them healthy. I think the one thing that I took from that is, no one piece of the puzzle can be awful. Like every piece has to be at least pretty good. Not everything has to be excellent, but like you can't have bad equipment managing. You can't have bad athletic training. All those things, stakeholders have to be pretty good. And we did that year, and the players bought in and we did well. But when that happened, every coach moved up. Every coach on the staff got a raise, whether it meant like the Nick Charlton was the OC, became the head coach. Mike Ryan was a linebackers coach, became the DC, and the guys who were, Corey Heatherman, who was the DC at Maine, now is the DC at Minnesota. He went to Rutgers as a linebacker. So everybody kind of got elevated, and there I got a pat on the back, which I didn't mind. Like, I was happy to have the ring, and I was happy to win and see the guys succeed. And by the way, I don't know if there's any game that I felt more triumphant in than the game we played you at your house. And that you probably don't remember because you blacked it out at this point, because you guys probably would have won the CAA if it wasn't for that game. Shane Simpson was an absolute beast, and we stopped you on 4th and 1. It was like, or no, maybe it was like 4th and 3 on the 20-yard line to sew it up. And apart from, the playoff victories, which were obviously awesome, but that was a game that I just couldn't believe. Anyway, it was fun, but there was no reward. There was no tangible reward except for just the sheer joy of winning. And
keeping your certification is essential to staying hired as a strength and conditioning coach. Both of our long-form courses, Fundamentals 1 and Fundamentals 2, offer CEUs to the NSCA, the NCSF, as well as the ASCA professional development points. Click the link down below to learn more about our education courses, which are both over 20 hours long and allow you to learn from some of the best practitioners in the field of strength and conditioning.
It wasn't like the end of the world for me, but I was like, that kind of sucks. And I think, to the whole point of the conversation was why, right? Every coach was on a contract. I was a full-time employee. I was, no, I didn't necessarily report to the AD, but I reported to the athletics department, the assistant AD. Lynn Coots was my direct supervisor at the time. She was great, but it just wasn't, in the structure of my job agreement to get a reward for winning. And, it just struck me in a certain kind of way because I almost felt like I was donating my energy. By the way, at the time, that was 2018, and my first son was born in 2017. So I was kind of dealing with that, and it's the biggest regret of my life, having to, well, not having him be born, but he was born, and then the next day I was at, winter workouts in February. He was born February 9th. February 10th, I was like, hey, I got off-season workouts today. So, I wasn't really around, and that's kind of the deal, I guess. And maybe it isn't, but I thought it was. And to the way that, the strength coaches were treated, that was how the head coaches and the coaching staff were kind of going about it. So I fell in line, and that's what I did. And that's not to say I wasn't totally around, but you know how it is, especially in February or in March when there's recruiting weekends and you go do that stuff. And it's the best. You know what I mean? It is the best. It's an addiction to me. It absolutely is. And so I didn't mind. I loved it, but you just don't realize what it's taken out in the other parts of the life. The 4 burners theory, if you will, right? All gas in one burner and none for any others. So it just, like time went on, we went through another head coach. Well, Nick Charlton got elevated. We were fine. We didn't have the greatest of seasons for certain reasons, but it was okay. And it just felt like as time went on, a couple things were happening. Like I was getting really good at the job, and it was kind of becoming boring. Not football, but the other like challenges. Things were just like I was spending a lot of time at football practice, which is awesome. But when you have a lot of other things to do as the director of a top department, and then you're realizing you're standing at a football practice doing work with football players who are injured for a reason because they didn't do the work when they should have, and then you're being told to like keep them busy. It just felt like it wasn't really worth my time. Um, and that goes back to the high performance model and what are we really telling people to do and why. But it just felt like I was kind of spinning my wheels on in the football sense. And then from an administrative aspect, I was kind of pushing my face into a glass ceiling because I was ready for an assistant AD job. But Maine was a school that is just a little bit underwater in terms of their operation. They operate at Division I level. They've got the minimum amount of sports. They can't really add sports because they don't have the funding to start those sports. The enrollment's kind of up and down. There's not an athletics fee, so they don't get a kickback from just general student enrollment. And there's no accountability really for those head coaches to win. So it's really just kind of a gray area because the coaches all want to win. Nobody wants to lose, but how are you being measured? And if you don't know how you're being measured, then it just really leaves a large gap for, the support staff to fall into. And there were other, that just led to systemic challenges with hiring there where, they never could hire somebody for more than what the minimum base salary was going to be. So that meant that any new employees, whether they were we'd never have a recurring head coach. We'd always get a first year head coach, no matter what the sport was. So then it's like, well, how do I explain to this coach what sports performance, what matters to a sports performance coach or a strength and conditioning coach rather. But that was my title, right? Director of sports performance. So, what matters to those coaches and how to really do things right. And when the head coaches get paid more and have their jobs on the line, then they're going to have their fingers in everything. And it just made it really challenging all around. And, another factor that was pretty heavy for me just personally was that I was, in charge of the department, but, because we didn't have coaches, I was trying to find a way to improve the student athlete interface at almost any cost, because that's what matters, right? Like what matters is the kid being able to, see progress, feel success, have high quality relationships with whoever it is that they're working with in order to win. And so one of the first things I did at Maine was I started a temporary job for really for GAs who weren't able to get full-time jobs because the field is just saturated with people like that who have the experience, are good coaches, and just haven't got a shot because there just aren't that many jobs, And so I opened 2 7-month temp positions, and they paid. At the time they paid I want to say they paid $15,000 a year over the course of 7 months. And what we did was, in order to make it service the whole academic year, we didn't pay them in December because you kind of end the fall before, like a couple weeks before Christmas, and then you come back a month later. So it's like, all right, well, you pick, you want to be paid in December or January, but we can't pay you in both. And that way we'd take them all the way through till the end of April. And then it's like, all right, well, sports, if you had 2 weeks left and it's open hours anyways, then you're fine. If you're the coach for that sport, we're like, hey, look, man, we paid you for 7 weeks or 7 months. Stick around for 2 more weeks, finish the end of the semester out. We'll help you get a job. So it worked out pretty well. But then, what ended up happening, we got a coach we got 2 coaches who were really good, in Jordan Sidwell, who's high level with the Braves. I think he might be the top dog with the Braves right now. And Matt Payton, you actually might know Matt Payton. He's an Iowa guy, but Matt Payton went to Creighton University and for his master's, and then he came to Maine. he did that 7-month temp. He went to the Braves too with Jordan. Actually, it was kind of interesting how it all worked out. He was only there for one season, wasn't in love with the pro ball, lifestyle, and came back. And the women's basketball head coach was like, "Hey, can we hire Matt Payton? We really love him. He did a great job for us, and he's a tremendous coach. I had a high level of respect for that guy." And I was like, it was one of those fork in the road decisions, right? Because at the time it was only men and women's ice hockey who at least they split the role. And at Maine, high level ice hockey, they had their own facility, their own, arena and everything. It's like, that makes sense. But with basketball, so I was like, okay, sure, why not? Because you're going to pay the guy. He did an ops job, like half ops, half strength and conditioning, which, by the way, is a really good split, I believe, because all those like minor decisions that add up to making a lot of impact on stress, the strength coach who understands the stressors could be responsible for. And so I said, okay.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, TeamBuilder. TeamBuilder has been my online software platform choice since 2019. Been using it at Towson, using it at Goldfinch, and use it with my online remote clients. You can learn more about them in the link down below. TeamBuilder is also part owner in the Plyomat, which will allow you to get quick, valid, and reliable jump data, jump height, ground contact time, and reactive strength index in just seconds. They are part owner of Plyomat, so you can check them out in the link down below as well.
And it wasn't bad. It really wasn't. But what happened over the course of 3 or 4 years was, really only good problems, but just it kind of struck me personally. Like, they did well. They won. I think they might have won at least 2. They definitely won 2 years in a row. I think they got beat the third, and then they won again the fourth. So like they had conference championship like 3 out of 4 years. So he was getting raises because he was contracted on the basketball staff. He was, obviously using our weight room because it was the only, like the hockey had their weight room, but it was, mostly just hockey. You could get in there, but they would use our weight room. And so now you had a coach who was essentially another head coach, but just over one team. He didn't report to me. I didn't necessarily have the ability to I didn't do his performance review, so I guess we'll just put it like that. I couldn't make suggestions to him or anything. But he was great. Like, he was still part of our staff in our staff meetings, and was really respectful and professional about the whole situation. But when his athletes came into the room, I didn't really have the ability to talk to him, and that was maybe on me in my own head, but it was just one of those things that was like, they're not really my kids because of this whole situation. And that just kind of like got out of hand, not in a bad way, but just that like the less I talked to them, the less that I like felt like I could talk to them. And then it meant like if I was in the basketball court, there was like a little bit of a weird vibe, it just kind of like escalated to a point. And again, maybe it was just in my own head, but there was situations like that we did in order to improve the interface because we didn't have the budget, but basketball did. It saved us a ton of money and we could do some other things with that. But just led to like weird and uncomfortable issues. For example, that team bought medicine balls. Okay. And when they bought the medicine balls, they would bring them into the weight room and then they would bring them out, which is fine. But at the same time, this NCAA, catastrophic injuries document comes out that's talking about the role of a strength and conditioning coach to conditioning and define conditioning, right? Because to me, it's like anytime you have heart rate elevation, it's just in a simple way to think about it, right? So that encompasses, almost anything that you're going to do, especially sport practice. So here are these strength and conditioning coaches being responsible for, the ins and outs of what's happening in sport practices. And back to the med balls, right? Like if you're going to deem a medicine ball a piece of equipment for, like, draw the line, is it a strength piece of equipment or is it a basketball piece of equipment? Like, Who knows? But it's a gray area, certainly. But like, okay, most people be like, oh, it's strength. So now you have basketball coaches or any, like this didn't just apply to basketball, but other sports too, using strength and conditioning equipment in components of their workout, their practices, but didn't want to have your advice on the workouts. And we were trying to like gain that leverage, right? We were trying at the same time have conversations between, the administration, the training room, the academic counselors, and be like, hey, we're not really looking at the total picture of stress here. We're still compartmentalized and siloed in this regard. And it was just too much. It was just too much for everybody because you already don't have, the full amount of staff members, right? Like a lot of our teams where they might have been allowed to have 2 assistant coaches. Like I know this was a deal with softball, but that they couldn't afford it. So it's like, well, we have a head coach and assistant coach. We could hire an assistant coach, but we don't have the budget for it. So how do you expect us to do these other jobs that require more work? Yeah, for the benefit of our student athletes, but it was just like another layer that made it too difficult. And then you compile that with the fact that most of those coaches were pretty green in the sense that they were generally first-year head coaches. Every single time, and athletic training is, I would never want to be an athletic trainer because it's an incredibly difficult job, and they are working tons of hours for no recognition and doing a great job. But it's all that's if strength and conditioning is a passion job, then athletic training is 10 times more. But those are all first years. And then you're giving them the power to stop a practice over a head coach who's also a first year, who's, just headstrong and wants to go. It's a recipe for disaster. And here I was in the middle of the whole thing. The biggest problem with it, Justin, was that I understood what was happening. Because if I didn't, you know what I mean? Like if I didn't, I would have been like, go, let's go. But I knew what was happening. Like every time you went for 2 weeks and a third of your kids had low back or hamstring or groin issues, you knew that the rest of the team was overreaching. But you didn't have the ability or the clout or whatever it was to get these coaches to buy in, because when you sit down and talk to them and you say the word hypertrophy, they shut down and they tell the administrators that, they need a new coach because they don't understand what you're talking about, which was a specific example that happened to me with men's basketball. So anyway, it was just like a significant compilation of events that was frustrating because of the knowledge that and the experiences that I had gained at Northeastern. If it wasn't for that 1 year that I had there, I would be a totally different coach right now. And it would be, I'd probably still, I had opportunities to go, bigger football, but, at the time, and this is the other half of the equation, back to that 4 burners, but I had a shot at Miami to go and be their 5th assistant for $25,000 a year with my newborn son, and I just was like, I couldn't. I had a shot at Louisiana Monroe to go work with baseball primarily and football, which by the way would have been my dream job. But it's like, okay, I'm already like not having enough time at Maine, and now you're gonna put me with baseball, where it's like you're on the road 5 days a week and then football. And if I really want to be big time football, which it would have worked, like it would have definitely worked, then I would have just spent, I would have been gone twice as much rather. So those were like all the things that just were like, wait, let's reevaluate. So what brought me to St. Lawrence was actually the fact that this job uniquely is the director of the fitness center and Division III strength and conditioning. And that, by the way, that includes 32 Division III teams. Not hockey, hockey's ECAC D1, which is cool because you still can go to those games and get that, atmosphere and see, Yale and Dartmouth and, the big time teams come to town, and, the kids love that. It's fun, obviously. And, but not really the control in a sense, but the ability to have a conversation with an athlete and give them the advice, right? So back to Maine with that women's basketball team, like I didn't feel like I had the respect from those players because they just didn't know who I was. Like to them, I was just like another guy who they saw in the weight room sometimes, but Matt Payton was their guy. And it worked. It really did. They're winning program. They're a highly successful program. Amy Vachon's the head coach, does a great job. But, that was just personal for me. And so now coming to St. Lawrence, where it's like, okay, I got the fitness center, which is every student, every faculty, staff, and community members all in one space.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Hawken Dynamics. I've had Hawken Dynamics for multiple years, dating back to my time at Towson, and still utilize them here at Goldfinch when I'm training athletes in Iowa. Hawken Dynamics makes it simple to be able to get input to find out what's going on underneath the hood with your athletes. Whether it's lower body assessment, upper body assessments, you want reliable data to find out how the athlete is putting force into the ground so you can be able to accurately return an athlete from an injury, and you can also find out how the athlete is producing force to check how your training is working. Check out Hawken Dynamics in the link down below.
32 Division III teams, and thank God for Team Builder, by the way, because if you are not on Team Builder, you need to seriously take a look at those guys. Shameless plug, because they have done more for my ability to coach than probably anything. But Team Builder's been amazing. We have the Platinum Pro, like the highest level subscription. I'd pay don't tell them I'd pay 5 times as much for it. I really would, because I can do it. Like it's a system and I can just run it. But I go in there at 11 o'clock and I run waves of 24 people every 30 minutes. So the first week or so is a little bit clunky because I'm just explaining the warm up because there's a lot of intent, associated with it. And then after they get the warm up, I'm just in that room for 5 hours coaching. And when they're good at training, I just go in there and train with them so they can see what it looks like and see the old man beat them. But anyway, it's just fun, right? It's just fun because I don't know, it's a little bit ego driven. Like I'm the guy and, people are looking to me for the advice and stuff, but there's a high level of reward for community members who like have pain. And, I've found a super high level of value in Dietz's, reflexive performance reset. And you can use some of those techniques to like get people out of pain right now. And so, I just had a community member yesterday who works his butt off. Guy's like 50 years old. He goes out with students and runs 5Ks and tries to beat them. Like, a lot of props to him. But he's like, hey, I got some plantar fasciitis. What do I do? And I just kind of, got there. I sat him down in a 90-degree angle with his legs straight and kind of got my hand into his calf. And he was, and I just go, hey, like, lay on it, or put a softball under there and just, kind of lay it on there for 5 or 10 minutes while you watch TV at night and you feel better. And he stood up and he was like, that feels better already. And it's like, it's those situations that really allow you to go, I feel good about that. It really truly help people feeling better. And, I guess to finish the long-winded answer, when you are the single person, right, then it's on you. And it's like, that's the fun part. That's the puzzle. And that was something I wasn't getting at Maine just because of all the communication, right? In order to get anywhere, you have to communicate with other people. They have to like your ideas and they have to go, okay, let's do that. But at Maine, everybody's underwater. So any new ideas are like, I don't have time. It wasn't their fault. But here it's like, if you're the only guy, then it's just your own, it's your own mental capacity that's saying, can I get this done or not? And so, we've been able to do some things to really improve the efficiency of the fitness center and, give actual like high level strength training, which by the way is not high level. It's basic foundational stuff. But like when I got here, our teams weren't squatting to depth. And it's like, all right, well, this is going to be a cakewalk because I'm going to go 5 levels higher than that, but it's going to take me years to do that, So, and I guess I'll just add one more thing to the whole equation is my first internship was with Jerry Martin. And I didn't, at the time, this was 2011, I had no idea the value of that to me, and I do now, at least to a greater extent. But I sat in his office and he said, John, look at the weight room. And I turned around and there's, 23 racks, beautiful floor, all power lift, like anything you'd ever want. And he's like, when I got here, here's what it looked like. And he showed me an old picture, one of these. It wasn't even like a regular size picture. It was like one of those square ones, all faded, like one of the Instagram filters you can use. And one incline bench rack, and I think he had said 7 mismatched dumbbells. He was like, this is what we had. Look at us now. And so it was like, that was kind of in my head, was like, how cool would it be to walk into a school like that where they don't have anything, don't know anything. The coaches, like in the interviews, the coaches were all but one of them, who, by the way, has now left. We're all like, let us know what we should be doing. So it was just an open door. And I was like, I'm going to walk through that door and just see what happens. But it's been a really fun, I'm just going to my second year now. It's been a great first year. We needed testing equipment, right? We bought Skyhook jump mats, which are amazing. We bought 2 sets of Broward timing systems. And that was it. We do a vert, a broad, a sprint, and 2 bike tests on our pre-existing Concept 2 erg bikes that Rowing was nice enough to let us use. And we built a testing protocol. I was like, hey, I need $11,000 to buy this stuff. And in one day, the coaches had, pledged enough money to buy that. And I was like, at Maine, this would have literally never happened. And I couldn't believe it, but we were off and running. And so it's just been a lot of fun since, and we're just trying to build it.
Sounds like you have purpose and impact. That's the thing that I wrote down here, is you have a purpose and you have an impact.
Yeah, well, if you don't have an impact, then maybe you need to rethink your job, right? Because I can sit in my office and write programming, but the way you impact is you go out and you talk to people. You shake everybody's hand, you dap them up. Like kids. It's walk-in times to our. We try to start them every half hour, but if they're a little bit late, a little bit early, listen. Like, just come train, please. We'll get there. We'll get to the accountability once you get in the room. But like, kids are like, hey, I'll see you later. I run up and like high five them in the middle of coaching somebody else. And it's like, it's such a simple thing, but it's just impactful to the kid. Like purpose, I think you just have to look in the mirror and figure out what it's really about. Because I was burnt out at Maine, and there were a lot of situations where like I was just like had blinders on, and like football was inside the blinders and my family and my everything else was outside, and I still struggle with it. Because you want to do a great job, and especially when you're the only person, it's all on you. And as you know, as a strength coach, pretty much at any capacity, you could be working literally 24 hours a day and not feel like you're doing enough. And I was at the point where I had this, I don't want to call it epiphany, but like I remember thinking like, football doesn't need me. It doesn't need me. It needs Tom Brady or Jerry Rice, like the big names, like John Lynch. And somebody already has the name John Lynch, by the way. So who am I? And like what's really interesting about that is how it's kind of, not that we've really done much of anything, but how it's kind of come full circle now with the football SIG. And like, I actually feel like maybe now that I have the capacity for it, I can get something done. Not me, but we like at the football SIG, I think we're making a ton of tremendous progress. I've met, you're kind of in this world anyway, but I've been able to meet coaches who never in my life did I think I'd be having a conversation with some of these guys. And so it's just cool to see how it's transpired. You don't always, like, I guess maybe the message is you don't always need to grind to go up. Not that it's not a grind, but the grind, like to me, the grind is like what that Miami job would have been, or what that Louisiana Monroe job would have been. Like just trying to climb the ladder, going up to the next level as the lowest guy, climbing, and then going to a lower level as the highest guy, and just doing that recurringly. Where it's like, look, this whole conversation is about what strength and conditioning is, what the job should be, how it should be structured, and like if you want job security, don't go to the highest level. It just isn't going to, it shouldn't exist. Like your job security should be solely based on your performance and your team's performance. And maybe we can talk about, how to figure out who's at fault for when things don't go the way you want them to go. That would be a great conversation to have. But, coaches don't just get fired at the Division III level, and maybe that's good and maybe that's not good, but for your family, it's good. And then it's kind of on you in any way. And so that was kind of the thing. I leave at 4:00. I pick up my daughter. I cook dinner at 6:00. I go coach my son's soccer practice. And every parent's like, "You're such a great coach." I'm like, "Well, I do get paid to do this for a living. So it's not like it's anything crazy."
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Vitruve VBT. With Vitruve, you can accurately measure what speeds your athletes are moving the bar. No longer do you have to program simply based on sets and reps. You can program for your more mature athletes based on the velocities that they are hitting. You can accurately measure at a great price with Vitruve, and you can have this integrate with your team builder, making it simple so you no longer have to write down the recorded reps from other devices. Everything in one place with Vitruve VBT. Check them out in the link down below.
But it's just fun, And then, actually, what I've been doing some fundraising. So I come back at about 9 p.m. and run a U16 hockey clinic out of here for about $100 a day. So, by the way, if you're a young coach, especially if you're a CSCS, charge for your sessions, right? I was thinking, like, what do I charge? And it's just easy to be like, I'll charge you $50. Like, I charge $50 for a single person, but I tell them I don't have the time to train you for 1 hour, because I'd rather not charge you and like give you a tip on your RDL while I'm like walking by than charge you $50 or even $100 to have to stand next to you for an hour, right? Where I'm like, I have too much to do, so I want to coach you, but I got other things, and by the way, if you want an internship, we need you. So, purpose is definitely important.
You mentioned this NSCA SIG, and I also know that you were on the CSCCA strength and conditioning coach leadership. Like, you've always wanted to keep doing more and doing these things. So it kind of makes a ton of sense as to why you want to do that and why you want to have that impact. I don't really think I have a question here. It's just more of a statement of what I've seen with you.
I don't know. I think if I had to give you like a reason, it's like I always worked. I grew up on a farm in Western Massachusetts. My grandfather was a Marine, and that's where it all started. He ran, we had a slaughterhouse, we had a lumber mill, and we had, livestock. And so in the summers, like all my friends were, riding their bikes around and doing jumps, and I was in the hayfield picking up bales. And it sucked. Like, that sucked. It was the worst. It started there. It was like I had splinters in my hands. I had hayseed all over me in every crevice. And that was a solid 6 hours of my day before I was 10 years old. Like, I was out there. And, it was just as fun as it was, awful, because you had 100 acres to run around on and, get into trouble and hurt yourself. But that was what I did. And then when I was in high school, I worked in a tobacco field. Amherst, Mass. If you ever go to UMass, look around before you get there, and it's tobacco fields.
Yeah, there's nothing there. I'm from Massachusetts, so I'm well aware of the lack of stuff to do in Western Mass.
Yeah. And I worked in a tobacco field for 5 years. I drive a standard truck because that's what I learned to drive on. It's just like, like adversity, right? So I always think if you haven't done Pat Davidson's Operation Drago, take a look at that. And if you want to, I'll send it to you. I got it on document. Don't tell him I said that, but I'll send it to you. He'll sell it to you. But that's a program. I think that's a program that's like physiologically the hardest thing the human body can do.
Is it harder than Small-Off?
I don't know what that is.
The Small-Off squat. That's pretty brutal.
I'll have to look into that.
I'll send you that one.
Operation Drago Mass 1 is 30 on, 30 off, 10 exercises. You got to get 15 reps, and you do each exercise in a circuit style for 3 rounds. If you get 15 reps on each exercise or any individual exercise, you go up the next day, and you do that 4 days a week for 4 weeks. And that's the first phase. So it's just like, we ran a little bit with our football team, and we called it the darkness because you just have to choose. But to digress, it's just like doing hard stuff, allows you to be okay doing hard stuff. It just moves the needle. And it's not like in strength and conditioning, it just never is really about the money. It's as awful as it sounds, but to work, I was an intern at UCLA. I did 30 hours a week at UCLA and then worked as a personal trainer at LA Fitness and a raw stress for less for the rest of the hours so I could buy Cheerios and like stay alive, and I was riding my bike to get anywhere because you can't park. I parked at the grocery store and paid $20 for parking because I didn't know what validation was. And that was like my last $20. So, it's just like, I'm okay with adversity in a lot of situations, which is can be a downfall in some ways, but you just kind of like get used to the grind and having things be hard. And then it's just, compared to you're always compared to other people. So if you can do more than other people can, then people think you're doing an all right job.
When you have the Division I aspect of St. Lawrence now, does that at all resemble what happened at Maine with women's basketball and having, do they have their own strength coaches? And if so, how are you going to apply what you learned from Maine to not have the same thing happen?
Well, so we're kind of separate. We're not like, he doesn't report to me. I don't report to him. He is a part of the hockey staff. Jared Hatz is the head strength coach. He started here in 2019 and he started this program, so before 2019, there was no strength coach they're just kind of like a lot of the D3 model where it's the coaches kind of just assigning the workouts that they think make sense. And so he had kind of put some of the framework together for, the D3 teams. They were like, hey, we got a strength coach on campus now. So can you help us out? Can you at least like throw us some of your old programs that you used for these sports? He was at Lebanon Valley College before this. So he had prior D3 experience with a lot of sports. So he had a lot of, that programming already existing. And so he kind of set the framework up and he did a really nice job of it. But it's a good working environment because before I was here, there was nobody else for him. And the value of just talking to another strength coach and like bouncing ideas off somebody else. And so it works really well. We don't see each other every day. They're not too far away from us. We have part of the other perk of coming here was we've got a brand new facility in the works that's been in the plans it had already been planned for a couple of years before I got hired. And then it was like my first assignment was like, hey, thanks for coming on board. Can you help us design this weight room? And I was like, yeah, definitely.
I would love to.
Yeah. Well, and thank goodness, man, because if you would have seen that, like that 2D before I got my hands on it, it was kind of gross. Like they just had a lot of equipment, just too much equipment, like barbells that are 1 foot apart from rack to rack. And it's just like, this isn't really going to work. So we made some changes to it, but no, it's a good situation now that'll actually be in Appleton Arena where our hockey team plays. So I'll be over there quite a bit more frequently whenever that kind of change goes down. But no, it's a good environment and he's got my back and I've got his back. We don't need it. We're not really at the point where like I can talk to our coaches and just say like, hey, here's what I think, which I do, speaking to your question about the experience from Maine, as a first year or a young a director, right? Sometimes it's difficult to go into those coaches' offices where like our field hockey coach had been there for 20 years and winning games, at a high level. Like they had a good field hockey program. Soccer coach had been there for a really long time. Athletic trainer had been there for a really long time. And I'm sure I'm missing a few others, but a lot of good coaches who had been there for a long time. And then you're coming in and being like, hey, this is all, we got to change all this stuff. And they're like, what do you mean? But here, like now I'm the guy, not only am I like the D1 drop down who's like done it and won, but also I've been in those conversations and had to be like, it's really just not the best way to do things. And so if you combine those two, where like I have the benefit of the doubt because of my current situation, and I have the ability to like just tell a coach like, hey, like this isn't the way it's going to be done. And here's an example, and this was through email, but one of our coaches for, I won't say who, but it was for a aerobic based field sport, a fall season field sport, had emailed me in, I guess it was June. And she was like, hey, I've been looking at this off season or a summer program, and I really think can we change a couple of the strength days to conditioning days. And then she went on to mention that in their spring season, she had built a great base of aerobic conditioning and wanted to continue that through the summer. And I just said,
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Sleep Me. Sleep Me are the makers of the Chili Pad, which has been my bed cooling device since 2020. Chili Pad will allow you to sleep and not wake up hot anymore. This was something that I had to worry about. I used to have the air conditioning down way too low. Now, I don't have to have the air conditioning as low because my Chili Pad, my Dock Pro, keeps my bed cold at night. Check out Sleep Me, check out the Chili Pad, check out the Dock Pro in the link down below.
That's not really what I would advise. Listen, you should start training strength in the spring. So we'll change that next year. And then in the summer, you need to continue to build strength, build some power, build power endurance, and get capacity through that so that when you come back into your preseason, you can get a little jolt of adaptation from your preseason and then be strong and maintain those. I don't like the term maintain, but, capitalize on those performance gains throughout your in-season. Because if you are focusing on aerobic capacity in the spring and in the summer and through osmosis and practice duration in the fall as well, you're asking for overuse injuries. You're asking for, protein to be your primary fuel source. And it's just, problematic. People are going to get injured. So, and I just told her, I just said like, no, no, because it's just not the right thing to do for the kids. And, I'm writing it like when I read the email, I'm like, all just pissed off and like, got to remind myself, like, they just don't know. They're trying to do the best thing. They just don't know. And, I wrote it and she responded back and it was okay. Like, thanks. Well, let's have a conversation. Like, hey, I'm happy to talk because let's educate you on why. So yeah, I guess that like those are kind of some of the things that experience, the Maine experience, had really helped with coming into St. Lawrence.
What do you think's harder to handle, success or failure? Because you said you had success at Maine, bouncing, not having as successful of a year. Like, which to you is harder to handle, and how do you work the two ways, ends of the spectrum?
I love the question. I don't know. I don't know which ones. I think they're probably equal. It's just about, they're absolute, right? It's the same way. It's like, to me, that's like, what's better, a trap bar deadlift or a back squat? Every exercise. Back
squat's the answer.
There we go.
Load the bar.
Front squat. Well, so like, but in the conversations with athletes, it's like, understand that none of these are really absolutes. They're just a tool in the toolbox. So, I think I've lost a lot. In my career as an athlete, I didn't have a lot of successful seasons. I'm not a great athlete. I don't, that's why I'm a strength coach. Let's be honest. I realized that I was way better at lifting weights than actually playing the sport. And so I settled right into that. But I, like my high school team, when I was a senior, had 3 wins. So like, you kind of got to swallow that pill, at some point and like be able to look in the mirror and figure out why you're losing. But I think to really like, I would bias winning as being harder for most people.
Yeah.
Because when you win, it just covers up the glaring problems, right? Don't we know winning solves all these issues? So when you're winning, everything's great. And when you're losing, the sky is falling. But when I was at Maine, one of the things that I really thought helped us be successful was what our format on our Sunday mornings, because I would set it up where when we were in season, we would do flush lifts. And a lot of people don't like that idea, but it was where the athletes were at. And at the time, it's like mentally, it was kind of what they needed. And we would do our heavy day on Tuesday, and then we would do a kind of a speed and an aerobic, we'll call it aerobic potentiation, some heavy bikes on Thursday. But anyway, Sunday we'd come into the weight room, and I wanted to have the whole travel squad in there as one unit. So we would do the rookie lift early. Like we do that at usually, it depended on what time the game was, what time we got back and everything. But the rookie lift would be like an hour and a half before the travel team lift, so I could set everything up. But I would do a 12 station circuit. We were working RPR into the rest periods so that we could really get guys feeling good. I liked it. It was good, actually. It was a lot of fun to run. But what I would do is usually at the beginning of the lift, I would bring them up. Sometimes it was at the end. It would depend. But I'd bring them up as a team. And I would give them my take on the game. And not just the game, but, there's a lot of value as a strength coach in the whole process, right? Back to that like strength and ops gig. Like I like that idea because you can control all those stressors that people don't think about. But it'd be like, hey, how was the flight? Like, was the flight, kind of jacked up? Did it take us an extra 30 minutes on the tarmac where we were sitting for a long time? Was there a seat, right? Because sometimes we'd have a bunch of donors get on the plane, and now like guys were stacked 3 to a row, not 2 to a row. What were the sandwiches like? Were they soggy? Did they like them? Like, where did we go? We would get fruit before the game. We'd give them fruit like during the games. And like, I remember one year at Villanova, I went to a grocery store in Philly and picked up the fruit platter, and all the grapes were moldy, and it's just like, what? Yeah, of course, when I'm ordering, 50 pounds of grapes, they don't care. They're just throwing them in a bucket and like giving me all the worst grapes. But for the game, those grapes are moldy. What's the locker room like? Are the athletic trainers inside the locker room or outside? Can they tape? We have female athletic trainers, so they can't be in the locker room. And where's that station? If you ever go to, well, at least when I was there, Delaware at the time, maybe not anymore, but that visiting locker room setup was kind of crappy. And so all those little components, the hotel, like where were the meeting rooms? What time was the meeting compared to the dinner? And it just compiled. And then you had the game. And of course, the game is, the main thing. But the feedback the players are getting on the game is from the sport coaches, who the minute the game ends, they're into the film on the plane, on the bus, and just like, I'm sitting behind the head coach, and I'm watching him rewind this one, like the ball hitting the wide receiver's fingers. And he's like, "Ugh, ugh," getting more mad every time he watches it. But I didn't have that. For me, it was one take. It was one take. And it was like the whole feel of the situation. It was how did it go? Not having the time to sit and dwell on things, but like feeling the energy, feeling the operation. We won some FBS games. We went out to Western Kentucky in 2018 and beat those. They kicked our ass in the first quarter. And then we hung around in the second quarter. We had a great halftime speech by one of our DB coaches who fired the whole team up. And then we came out in the second half and we won that game on a blocked field goal. But the crowd was in it. One of our wide receivers got reprimanded for Baker Mayfielding the stadium, and we heard about that. But those were all things that were in my head. And so when I got in front of them on Sunday morning, and now if we won, it was always a different vibe. And it was like, if we won, then I could be like, hey, really nice job. Really good job. We got the W, but listen, we got these little things that it was close, man. Like if we didn't block that kick, we're sitting in here, licking our wounds, but we blocked the kick. You had a great night. You went out, you probably got back at, you probably just came from the party, you got back at 6 a.m. and partied from 6 to 10. And now you're here at 1, they celebrate the wins, but then you lose, right? And when you lose, then it's easy to cherry pick the things that didn't happen well in the game. But for me, it was always like the total overall package of what happened, and like like how you handled yourself, what your not like physical posture, but what your emotional posture was, like how your ability to handle those situations was. And we did that I made a habit of doing that from 2016 when I took over throughout my time as the head guy there. And, I felt like that was, not that I can take credit for it, but that was part of, I think, why some of those guys who I mentioned earlier who became great leaders on the team were able to do that, because you kind of give them the tools and then it's up to them to figure out how they're going to use those tools. But, winning's obviously easy, but losing is where your opportunities are, because then I think it's very easy to look yourself in the mirror. And for guys, like for the ones we had at Maine, at least, who were used to the adversity and like, how am I going to overcome this? Like we recruited a lot of guys who couldn't get into Villanova, who couldn't get into Towson, who couldn't get into, BC or Syracuse or wherever, the schools around them that were big time schools, who just had to find a way. And that was their last shot. We also, like any probably, CAA team, we had a good amount of FBS, drop downs who like just wanted to play. So we had a lot of guys who were used to those adversities and like could connect to the message. So
taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Powerlift. Powerlift is located here in Iowa in the United States of America. I've utilized them back in 2011 when I had them at Harvard. I also had them at the University of Maryland, and then finally when I was at the University of Iowa. Their equipment is strong, it is durable, it is dependable. It's also customizable based upon whatever your needs are at your school. Check out Powerlift at the link down below.
Winning, probably I'd bias, but you got to be able to use them both.
It's interesting you talk about the ops and strength and conditioning, because the last game that I was a part of with Towson, I did operations and strength and conditioning, because the ops guy, Lance, him and his wife were having their first child born Monday after the game. And I was like, dude, I did actually, because I did ops too when I was at Maryland. And I was like, dude, you're not going to miss the birth of your child. And it really was, to be a part of all of it. You're like, okay, this is kind of those higher level, high performance manager roles. You're like, yeah, let me start making some of these decisions,
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun. I mean, like at some point that's why I really do like that role, because you get to make those, but at the same time, it's like if you're doing those things, you just can't coach. I mean, you could, but it's just a time situation. Like it takes a lot of time to consider all those variables. It's like sports science is the same thing, right? Like we have Catapult here, but I'm not like, it's our first year. It's my first year using it. I used Polar Team Pro at Maine, but being able to look really at the data the way that you want to use it to its fullest extent is like, that's a full-time job, man. And we'll get there, but hopefully we get some interns by then.
You've said the word culture a few times on the show, and I wrote it down. How do you personally define culture?
Well, I talked to Joe Ken about something similar to this on a thing we did called Mental Reps earlier this year, maybe about a year ago now. And he said something that stuck with me, and he said, are you player-led or coach-fed? And I don't know if maybe that doesn't describe culture, but like that's a statement to me that's like integrity. Like, what are you going to do when nobody's looking? Who's taking control of this situation? Who's onboarding, kids, and who's like showing people the way? So I don't know, maybe that's not a great example. I don't guess I have like a great single definition for it, but if I had to, it's like the way you do things, which to me is more about integrity than anything. But, do I have the ability to give you a program or tell you that a program is available? And when I go in the weight room, you're doing it. And when you see me, you're like, hey coach, I just had a quick question about this exercise. And then they're pulling up my program, which of course at the Division I level doesn't happen because you're physically with them every time. But when it's 32 teams and I have to run a fitness center for 3 hours a day, which is part of the time I'm spending right now to talk to you. But I'm just not in there all the time. There are in-season lifts that get scheduled later in the day when it's the best for the team schedule, but I'm not there, so there's a coach or a GA who's, supervising that lift. And it's like, are the kids going to be able to do things the way that I showed them how they should be done, even though I'm not there? And so, okay, maybe I'm developing this answer for you as I go. But the two things that I tell them that I think are the most important to success as in training and as a student athlete are intent and consistency, right? Consistency is the ability to just get in there, like show up and do it every day. And intent is understanding what you're trying to do, how to do it, all the intricacies, right? I can go pretty deep with this because of the experience I had at Northeastern, and where it really, like, you can really start to nitpick technique. But, just in a general sense, like, the off-season program for me is 5 days a week. It's absolute strength, speed strength, an off day or like a conditioning day is what's in there. Strength speed on Thursday, and then a volume or capacity on Friday, like a local muscular endurance type thing on Friday. And they can pick any number of days. Like, hey, and I give them profiles based on the energy system of their sport, where, like, hey, if you're a power sport or like a thrower or a football player, like, you probably need to be 4 days a week, baseball, softball, versus if you're an anaerobic sport like soccer or field hockey or even lacrosse, then you're 3 to 4 days a week. And it's always up to them, 2 to 4 days a week. And then we have golf, and we have riding, and we have rowing, and we have Nordic ski and alpine ski, where it's like, hey, and really, by the way, alpine ski is up there with the 4 day a week. But if you're a Nordic and you haven't trained a lot, like, just come in. Like, let's get 1 day a week. I'll show you how to deadlift. I'll show you how to front squat. And if you want to learn the clean technique, come 2 days and we'll do the Tuesday day. And just giving them the tools and then allowing them to have intent. And, one of the things that I realized at Maine that allowed us to be successful, because we didn't always have great interns. We didn't always have interns. I didn't have any assistant coaches for those first 3 years building up to our 2018 season. But, what I did was I taught the players what it should feel like, what muscles they should be thinking about. And I've presented on this, but, then they can coach each other. And what happened, like, I had guys like, you'd shoulder press. You imagine you shoulder press and the ribs come up and the low back extends and the bar kind of goes in front. You don't get your head through. And I would have our seniors going up and judo chopping guys in the oblique and damn near knocking the wind out of them and being like, do it better next time. Just took one of those, and to me, that's culture. To me, it's like, when you understand intent, when you can take ownership of not just what you're doing, but then also what other people are doing. And of course you have your typical, leadership situations where guys have to be okay with just, being assertive and not worrying about feelings all the time. Like, it's for the greater good of the team and ultimately our ability to win.
What would be something as a piece of advice that you would give to young coaches, older coaches? Like, is the message different based upon how long somebody's been working in the field? What is your piece of advice to try to help push the field forward?
Yeah, I guess I got two things. On the intent piece, if you don't really know anatomy, then you're limited in your coaching. There were a lot of things I took from Northeastern in that 1 year that, like, I learned muscles I had never heard of. And it allowed me to understand more about, like, exercise technique and how to actually use an exercise to get somebody better versus just making them strong in their currently existing pathology. So if we're defining a pathology as the way your body moves without you having much of an intervention, right? And that's based on a number of things: the sport you play, your biomechanics, lever length, energy system of that sport, position. those create certain pathological situations that in high intensity or like lactic threshold, or in-game situations when you're really straining physiologically, then you move to pretty deep compensation patterns, and that happening recurringly over time leads to overuse. And you can do a whole lot in the weight room to counterbalance that and build successful programming without having to worry a whole heck of a lot about periodization, sets and reps, and the things that people really think are important. And not to say they're not, but again, intent, right? Understanding the why and how to do things goes a lot further than people, I think, give it credit for sometimes. And then really the number one thing is just putting yourself in the position to be successful. What do I mean? Compound interest. And I think from Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about I'm forgetting the name of the actual concept there, but if you're trying to melt ice, and you move the temperature from 28 to 29 degrees, the ice doesn't melt. And then at 30, it doesn't melt. And at 31, it doesn't melt. But then at 32, it starts to melt, right? So you can be making progress without seeing the progress happening in real time. But if you're putting energy out there, then it's inevitable at some level that it'll come back to you. I'm doing this interview right now because of our relationship, our pre-existing relationship as competitors in the CAA, and now our joint work on the NSCA Football SIG. But without that, even without the Football SIG, I'm not sure this would be transpiring, right? But why am I there, right? I'm on the Football SIG because one day I was doing some cool things at Maine, and I had the Polar Team Pro data, and I was like, I don't know if anybody's thinking about this stuff, so I put it on PowerPoints. And I went and I spoke at, I think it was the New England Regional Clinic, or maybe it was the Maine State Clinic at Western New England with Lindy Kelly, who's at, not Western New England, Nor'easters there. I can't think of the name of the school. The Nor'easters, Biddeford, Maine. I'll think of it in a minute. But, I did a presentation for them, and the Connecticut State Clinic NSCA director was there, and I just told him, hey, I'd love to keep presenting on this. I think this is an important topic. So I went and spoke at Connecticut, and then from there, I got another ask at the Vermont State Clinic, and that was actually a virtual clinic where Eric McMahon had just taken over for Scott Caulfield at the NSCA. He was presenting on that same, clinic with me. So he had a chance to listen to that presentation. It was the same one. It was the same one I did before, and he liked it. And so he wanted me to speak at the national level at the coaches conference back in 23, I guess it was. And then, it was always football. It was conditioning for football. And that kind of led to the Football SIG, only because I had said, I have some information I think is important. I want to try to put it out there, see what other people think. If nothing else, just for my own, help, and tell me what I'm doing wrong here. But, those just things that I had started doing for, really just CEUs, like, hey, if I can get paid to go to the national conference, get a free hotel room, and get another 2 CEUs, like in a different category, then let's go. But you got to put yourself out there, right? You got to put yourself in the position to have success. Especially in football, I think people have this idea that they don't want to share their ideas because they don't want other people to get their ideas. But if you don't tell people what you know, then they don't know what you know. And if people don't know what you know, then you're nobody, right? So why is Cal Dietz a big name in the field, right? Why is Louis Simmons a big name in the field? Because they told other people what they knew. They just wanted to share the message for the greater good. Now Cal makes a ton of money off his stuff, and go ahead and do that. But come up with something, write a book. Like I cited Pat Davidson earlier, right? Pat Davidson sells those programs. He sells them like crazy, right? So you can start by just putting it out there. And then once people are interested in it, start selling it. But those little things are the things that allow you to gain success where you don't even know that you're gaining success. Somebody will ask you to do something instead of you asking them. And then, it's just Naval Ravikant, who's kind of a modern day philosopher who I've read a lot of his stuff. He talks about luck, and luck isn't always just blind luck, but you need to like create luck. And one of the examples I think of a lot is, if a billionaire finds a sunken treasure somewhere, well, he can't just go get the treasure. He needs a scuba diver. So he's going to look up the best scuba diver in the world to go down there and get that treasure. And if that's you, then now somebody else's luck became your luck because you're a high level professional, and now they're recruiting you to help them do a job. So, just think this is really prevalent in this field, but play positive sum games, right? It does not help you to bring other people down in order to allow you to seem better. Because if the people who you have relationships with are improving their status, then because you have a relationship with them, your status improves as well. So, that's hard to see as a young coach. And it's because it's such a daunting field and it's such a dog eat dog. You lose, you get fired, and who's better than who, and how do you even gauge who's better than who? But you just got to make friends, and you just got to help people, I think, and put the energy out there, because it's physics, man. It's the law of conservation of energy. You put it out there, it'll come back to you eventually.
That's a perfect place to end this conversation. John, that has been awesome. I got tons of great notes here. Thank you for sharing, and I've learned a lot, and I know our listeners will as well.
Appreciate you, Justin, and you guys are doing great things at Strength Coach Network. I'm really excited to see where you take this thing. And again, positive sum games, man. I'm happy for you. Let's roll.
Thanks, brother.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.